Mincha, the build of Mincha is very simple. It starts off with Ashrei, talking about Mincha during the week. In a minute we'll talk about Mincha on Shabbat, but we're on page 232 for those of you who are dedicated enough to want to turn to it. 232, of course, is a very special page because even if you're dyslexic, it's going to be 232 whichever way you read it. No, that's a different kind of. There's always somebody who's going to give me a hard time about this. If you would just turn back for a moment to the blessings on the Wayfarer's Prayer, which is on page 222. So that is a page that really can't be muddled up by anybody. We're not going to look at it today, but I just in order to be able to swing this past everybody without being given a hard time. Actually, this always reminds me, I have a friend who was a rabbi in South Africa for many years in a community, and he said that they used the Birnbaum Machzor on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, so everybody would be using the same Machzor, the same prayer book, in order that everyone should know what the pages are. They had somebody announce the pages. And he said every year when it came to the blowing of the shofar, the person who announced the pages, without even realizing what he was saying, the blowing of the shofar happens to be on page 222. And he said, the blowing of the shofar is on page 222. And my friend said it was terrible because like Rosh Hashanah is like one of the most serious days of the year, and like he would wait for this every year and start giggling. And I think he was like the only person who realized how ridiculous this was. The blowing of the shofar would be on page 222. Whatever. Unfortunately, we're on page 232, which for the vast majority of dyslexics is a good page to be on. For the minority, of course, it's going to be a little bit complicated. But it's a shame. Maybe we'll get to 333 at some point, and then it'll be okay, right? It starts with Ashrei. Ashrei, of course, we know and love. We've been through it. We've been through it pretty much in depth. We've recited it twice already in Shacharit, once in the Sukkot Zimra, and once after the Amidah, and now we're reciting it over here as well. The idea is to have a tefillah before you begin the Amidah. You got to prepare yourself, right? Which means that the Ashrei is going to be a prayer which is going to allow us to prepare ourselves. Again, in certain Nuschaot, so for example in Nusach Sfaradit or Teman, they've probably got a series of prayers that come before that as well. Some places have the custom to recite Korbanot before they begin Mincha. What can I tell you? It depends on what kind of a community you're praying in. Most communities don't, but sometimes they will, and if they do, just that you should know that what they're saying is all the korbanot, which over here in the Art Scroll Siddur don't appear, but in many other Siddurim they do appear right before Mincha, and it's just telling you what was offered up in the temple in the afternoon, what was offered up, because again the prayers are taking the place of whatever was happening in the temple. We don't have a temple today, Mitzvah Hashem, very soon we will have one, but until then, we've got the prayers over here to take the place of the services that were happening in the temple, and then we've got a half Kaddish over here, which again, what does half Kaddish represent? Transition, right? We're going from the introduction to Mincha into Mincha itself, into the Amidah. The Amidah is going to follow the same Amidah that we prayed in the morning. Again, depending on which Nusach you're using, if you're davening Nusach Ashkenaz, there'll be one minor change. On the way towards the end, instead of saying Sim Shalom on page 246, we say Shalom Rav.
Yeah, I wondered about that. Why do you guys do that?
Why do we do that? First of all, to be contrary. It is inconceivable that we should all agree on everything. That's ridiculous, right? But aside from that, there are two different authors over here. What was in the Gemara? Each one is looked at, each one is discussed, and what Nusach Ashkenaz does, it makes a little bit of a compromise. So it says Sim Shalom in the morning, and then Shalom Rav is said in the afternoon and in the evening. Amongst the Hasidim, the custom is to recite Sim Shalom at Mincha as well, and to recite Shalom Rav in Aravit. Now, what do you do in Aravit? You say Sim Shalom, you say Shalom Rav. You say it all the way through. You're consistent all the way through. Yeah, so what we see is like a Again, interesting, Nusach Sfard becomes a little bit of a compromise. The Hasidic Nusach, a little bit of a compromise in the so the Ashkenazi Nusach is Shalom Rav for Mincha. The Sfardi and the Nusach Sfard is Sim Shalom, and in Aravit, in Ma'ariv, it's going to be for Nusach Ashkenaz, and the Hasidic Nusach is going to be Shalom Rav, and for the Sfardim and for the Temanim, it's going to be Sim Shalom. That's really the only difference over here with regards to the Amidah itself. And then Tachnun is recited. Now, regardless of which day of the week it is, it's always going to be the shorter version of Tachnun. So even if it's a Monday or a Thursday, which on Shachrit we had a much longer one, we spoke about it yesterday, we've got a much longer Tachnun, even nevertheless, during the afternoon service, we recite the shorter Tachnun, right on page 250. You just follow the little footnotes over here about when to put your head down, when to sit up, when to stand up, and it'll be, hold on a second, it'll be said. In some communities, they recite at the beginning of at the beginning of Tachnun, they recite the Vidui. Again, Hashem, Hashem, Kerachum v'Chanun. Do we say that? Nusach Ashkenaz, the custom is not to say that. In Nusach Sfard, which is a Hasidic Nusach, and the Nusach of the Sfardim, the custom is to say it. Again, whatever they're doing, it's fine, right? If they say it, so either say it along with them, or at least know what it is that they're saying. And if they don't say it, that's fine as well. Yeah.
The Tachnun. Okay, I don't think we're going to end up davening Mincha by the Briz, but there is a Briz.
Oh.
That's how you're davening in the shul here later on.
Yeah.
Do you say
so here, let's have just a little look into Tachnun itself before we get to that particular detail. Tachnun is recited every day unless there is something happy going on that day, right? So, for example, happy, of course, does not mean the Monday breakfast over here in the yeshiva. That's
throws me off then.
That doesn't count. I think that's beyond happy. I think the reason is it's so much that you probably need to say Tachnun just to balance out the two. That the idea is like this: when you've got something which is relatively joyful, then you don't say Tachnun. So, for example, on Rosh Chodesh we don't say Tachnun. On Yom Tov we don't say Tachnun. On Shabbat we don't say Tachnun. What is interesting is that under normal circumstances, if the next day you're not saying Tachnun, if the next day is a special day that you don't say Tachnun, then on the Mincha beforehand, you don't say Tachnun either, right? So what does that mean? On Friday afternoon, when you daven Mincha, regardless of what time you daven Mincha on Friday afternoon, you don't say Tachnun. Why not? Because it's Erev Shabbat, right? And the Mincha before a joyful day is a day that Tachnun is not recited in. Now, there are other moments when Tachnun is not recited specifically just for that one day. So, for example, like you said, there's a bris. So, this morning, in the minyan that Rabbi Ullman davened in, there was no Tachnun, right? Because it's the father of the boy that's having the bris. Sorry, the grandfather of the... Oh, hold on a second. Maybe there was Tachnun. It depends. Hold on a second. I'm sorry. There are three people that if they're part of the minyan, means that you don't say Tachnun. The first one is the father of the son. The second one is the Moel. And the third one is somebody called the Sandek. Now, the Sandek is the person who holds the baby when the bris is being performed. He's going to do that? Okay, so good. So in Rabbi Ullman's minyan this morning, I was right, you see, just by chance. They did not say Tachnun in Rabbi Ullman's minyan this morning. They did not say Tachnun. However, in the minyan of the other grandfather, they did say Tachnun. Right, again, because there's only three people knock out Tachnun this morning. One is the father of the boy, of the baby. One is the moel, the circumciser, and one is the sandek, which is what Rabbi Ullman is going to be doing, which is holding the baby. Successful moalim, right, moalim who are under great request, so they'll go years without saying Tachnun because every day they're making brisin. Actually, I was in a bris not so very long ago. A bris that took place on Shabbat, so that's already not such a regular occurrence. And the moel, the bris was in Harnof, and the moel had walked in from next to Bells, which is not so very far away. It's like sort of, I don't know if you know where Belz is. That's where he was coming from. If you don't know where Belz is, he was still coming from there, and he was walking to Har Nof, and he mentioned, unbelievably, by the time he got to Har Nof, it was about, I would imagine it was probably around 10 o'clock, I think, when he got there to make the bris. But he mentioned that he'd already done 4 brises
Really?
right before he came to Har Nof, that's pretty prolific. There are Moalim who are like that. He's one of them. He probably hasn't recited Tachnun for probably for years. They've probably forgotten how to say it, I would imagine, actually. But for the rest of us, so what happens if you go to the bris and you stay in the bris and you eat the Suda in the bris, and at the end it's late enough to be able to daven Mincha already, then you'll miss out Tachnun as well, because it's considered to be one continual simcha from the beginning to the end. If, however, you go to the bris and then you come back here, or they go to the bris and they decide at the end of the bris that they're not going to daven Mincha because maybe it's still a little bit too early, so then what do you do? Then at that point, wherever you daven Mincha, you should be reciting Tachnun together with everybody else.
The location is different.
If the location is different, and if there hasn't been a big gap between the end of the bris and the davening Mincha, right? So again, Tachnun, you'll find there are some communities where they don't say Tachnun very often. In Hasidic communities, for example, they're very keen on not saying Tachnun, and they tie it into, if it's a yard site, if it's a commemoration, the anniversary of the death of one of the Rebbes, so then they don't say Tachnun on that day. It's considered to be a semi-joyous occasion, so they don't say Tachnun. There are some communities which I'm not sure I understand, but there are some communities where they never recite Tachnun at Mincha time. So, for example, in Boston, in Har Nof, they will never recite Tachnun. I don't know what the source for that is. I once asked somebody, the best they could come up with was that in Eastern Europe, so the Hasidim used to daven Mincha pretty late, and sometimes it was very late. And when you daven Mincha after sundown, you can no longer say Tachnun. And they thought perhaps the origin of the custom not to recite Tachnun only at Mincha time, regardless of what time of the day it is. Here, you can go there today, daven Mincha at 1:15 in the afternoon, and they won't recite Tachnun. Like I said, I'm not sure halachically what the reason for that is, but just that you should be aware that that's a possibility. If there is a chatan, right? So Mirta Hashem, when you find the person that you're supposed to be getting married to, and she is gormless enough to agree to marry you, right? Which it's two separate things. You may have met her, but she may not want to get married to you. So you have to hope that these things are going to coincide with each other, right? Of course, after you've been married for a couple of years, you'll wonder what it was you were hoping for. But in the meantime, if you're a chatan, what is a chatan? Somebody on the day of his marriage and for the 7 days after the marriage, the whole time that he's in the special celebrations called Sheva Brachot. So then also you don't recite Tachnun in the minyan that he is praying in.
So what do you do during the Tachnun time? You sit
Nothing. You skip. You just go straight on to Kaddish.
with the rest of the people in the minyan, the rest of the minyan?
Everybody skips it out. Everybody's skipping it out, right? Because the Chatan is there together with everybody, and that means that no Tachnun is recited not in the morning and not in the afternoon either, right? So they're a pretty good commodity to get a hold of, and if you become Mirta Hashem, you'll find your beshert, you'll find your soulmate, and you will establish your homes and you'll get married. And then for the week of your Sheva Brachot, you could really rent yourself out to various minyanim, right? And hopefully they'll pay you good money for coming to pray in their minyan so that they can skip out Tachnun, which of course, especially in the afternoon, will save probably at least 90 seconds, if not maybe even 100. It's serious stuff.
What is Tachnun?
Tachnun is a special series of prayers that are recited that are to do with the destruction of the temple. That we're bemoaning the fact that we don't have a temple. So again, any day that's got a kind of a joyous dimension to it is a day that we don't will not say Tachnun. Nobody's going to say Tachnun. Yeah.
We also don't say Tachnun nor Aleinu, any mincha.
Really? Wait, never no Tachnun at a mincha.
No Aleinu at mincha.
Really? Okay. Aleinu I understand, because Aleinu is something which was added in, right? According to some opinions, it was added in. Yeah, first of all, Aleinu is it's a beautiful prayer, which was it was authored by Joshua. But it's interesting. I wonder if perhaps the reason for that is maybe because Mincha Mariv were davened together.
Yeah, Minhagenu Litpalel Mincha ve'Arvit Smucha.
Oh, there you go. Very good. Okay, because Aleinu is the end. Aleinu is the end of davening, right? Which means that if you daven Aleinu, maybe it's a problem with davening Aravit immediately after Mincha if you've recited Aleinu. Now it's interesting, by the Ashkenazi we don't have this problem. We daven Mincha, and then but in the Chutz La'aretz, for example, where it gets dark late, so very often people daven Mincha Mariv together, whilst it's still light outside.
But they still say Aleinu. Right,
but they'll still say Aleinu at the end of Mincha, and then they'll start saying V'urachum immediately afterwards. But maybe that's the origin over there. Need to look. You know what? It might be based on a Rambam, because a lot of the Yemenite halachas are based on the Rambam, on Maimonides and the Mishnah Torah. Maybe there's something over there that would explain why that is. In all events, that's Tachnun, and that's going to be said. It's not going to be said depending on where you're praying. And then there's Aleinu. For us, there's Aleinu. At the end of Aleinu, after Tachnun is a full Kaddish. Right, full Kaddish denotes the end.
That's it. Mikna is that short?
Yeah. Well, what's the problem? It's not that. It's not as short as I'm making it sound, because you've got a repetition of the Amida over there as well, right? Which means that inside of Mincha you recite. If you're davening with a minyan, everyone recites Mincha together, and then the Mincha is repeated. Now we spoke about this once a little while ago downstairs in the minyan downstairs for the beginners over here. So they don't do it like that. What they do is something called it's like a half a Mincha. And they start, the person who's the Chazan, he begins the repetition of the Amida before anyone's recited it. And he says it up into the Kedusha, everyone says the Kedusha together. And then it all goes quiet and everyone starts reciting the Amida quietly. But in normal, minyanim, where there isn't a problem of either time or there isn't a problem over here, they try to do it because they want people to become the Chazan and to become used to praying and to, representing the community. So over there, so under normal circumstances, you've got a whole recitation of everyone recites the Amida together quietly, and then it's repeated. And then you have Tachnun, and then you have Aleinu. So it's not quite as short as I made it sound, but if you want to be optimistic, you can definitely do so. Here in the yeshiva, 25 minutes, I would say, to get through Ashrei, and then, then probably like another 15 minutes for the half Kaddish. And then, whatever.
We don't repeat Amida
we'll get there. Just one last thing before we move on to Arvit. The only thing which is an exception to the rule is when there's a fast day. Right? On a fast day, there's Kriyat Torah in Mincha, which means you daven Ashrei. After Ashrei, the Sefer Torah is taken out. There is a special Torah reading which is specifically for fast days. Why they're called fast days, I don't know. They seem to go very slowly, but nevertheless, there's a special Kriyat Torah, and 3 people are called up. All 3 people that are called up to the Torah have to be fasting, and the 3rd person actually gets to read the Haftarah as well. There's a Haftarah which is read, right, coming from the prophets, which is read on a fast day, special one for fast days, and then after that, the Sefer Torah is put back into the Aron Kodesh, and the Amidah is then recited. Inside of the Amidah, there are 2 changes. One of them is a special prayer that's added into Shema Kolenu, which is a prayer for the fast day. And the second one is that everybody, even in Nusach Ashkenaz, says Sim Shalom instead of Shalom Rav. Shabbat Mincha, we've got also Kriyat Torah. Interestingly enough, on Shabbat, we don't make do just with Ashrei, but we say Uva L'Tzion as well, which is an extra prayer that's added in after Ashrei, and then Uva L'Tzion, and then we have the Kriyat Torah. What Torah portion is being read is the beginning of the Torah portion of the next week. So, for example, last Shabbat we read Parshas Korach, right? And at Shabbat Mincha we read Parshas Chukat. This week we'll read Chukat, and at Mincha we'll read Balak, right? And That's just the way that it goes. After the Sefer Torah has been put back, then Mincha for Shabbat afternoon is recited. The Mincha, the Amidah, of course, is different because it's referring to Shabbat, it's not referring to the weekday. And afterwards, there is a little prayer called Tzidkatcha, which is recited only on days when Tachnun would not have been said, when Tachnun would have been said if it wasn't Shabbat. So on a regular week, for example, last Shabbat, this Shabbat, right? Those are, if it wouldn't have been Shabbat, it would have been a regular week. There wouldn't have been any reason not to say Tachnun. So on Shabbat afternoon, we say Tzidkatcha. There is a custom, a very beautiful custom, which is, I think, a little bit more seriously taken in outside of Israel than it is over here, that on Shabbat afternoon, after Mincha, in the summer, there is a custom to recite a chapter of Ethics of the Fathers, of Pirkei Avot. I remember, when I was a kid, that's what it was taken very seriously. Over here, people tend to, I think people just sort of miss it out. I'm not 100% sure why. Interestingly enough, the original custom to recite a chapter of Pirkei Avot was only between Pesach and Shavuot. There are 6 weeks, six Shabbatot. In between, there are 6 paragraphs, there are 6 chapters of Pirkei Avot. So one chapter per week brings you to the end and gets you ready for Shavuot. The custom was extended because the idea is very simple. Shabbat afternoon in the summer is very long, and if people are spending a little bit of time learning Pirkei Avot, which is Ethics of the Fathers, it's a very beautiful book to learn. It's full of ideas of how to be better people. So hopefully it's going to have some kind of an influence on us. The Chafetz Chaim once said, even if it doesn't have a major influence on us, at least it means that we're not standing around in shul speaking things that we shouldn't be speaking whilst we're reciting Pirkei Avot. Yeah.
So you guys do the Torah after the Amidah?
No.
Not on Shabbat, in fast day?
No.
Okay, so it's before.
Always comes before the Amidah.
Okay.
At Mincha time, right?
Right, I'm Mincha, right, because I don't see it.
A lot of shuls, a lot of synagogues.
Okay.
A lot of synagogues, the rabbi says Pirkei Avos.
Yeah.
Of the community.
I don't know what happens. I mean, if you ask me, I mean, what the way that it should really be done is that the rabbi, instead of everybody saying a whole chapter of Pirkei Avot, the rabbi should get up and give a little explanation about 1 or 2 of the Mishnayot that are there, because of course it's absolutely packed full of information. Pirkei Avot, it really is. It's something fantastic, and just to read through it quick, it really is chock-a-block full of fantastic information, and. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me in the least, because it's like, and each time you learn it, there's something new there. Each time you go through it, there's another thing and another detail that you didn't realize, and it really is fantastic, and it's a wonderful thing to do on Shabbat afternoon, because anyway, it's a summer and it's pretty long, and there's plenty of time to to have a little Shabbos afternoon shluff, right, and a little snoozy,
I heard that word before, like slow.
That's a Yiddish for a little snooze. But it's interesting that because we're Jewish, right? Somebody once said that in Hollywood they used to say, if it's worth doing, it's worth overdoing, which strikes me as a very Jewish. That's like a very Jewish approach to things, right? So a little afternoon schluff, right, could be like 3 hours long. It could be 4 hours long.
Years ago in New York, there was a big scandal, police scandal. So they formed the Nap Commission.
Okay.
So everybody from then on said, "No, I'm going to the Nap Commission."
So here in Israel, I had a cute idea that Tanakh, which is the whole of the Bible put together, right? It's comprised of Torah, Nevi'im, Nun, and Ksuvim, which is the writings, the prophets and the writings. So somebody who's just learning Nach, you're learning the prophets and you're learning the writings. So the writings are things like the Megillot and Shir Hashirim and all those kinds of things, right? And so somebody once said that he is an expert in Nach. Right? Nach means to have a nap in Hebrew. He says he's an expert in Nach. He says between 2 and 4 every afternoon, he's busy working on Nach. So it's the same kind of an idea.